Hey team, Coach A here, and welcome to Unit 4, Day 3, the Scramble for Africa. So our objective for the day is after reading Expansion Was Everything, Europe's Colonization of Africa, learners will be able to cite evidence and summarize through 4 text-based questions, scoring 66% after revision RH 910.1. Our I can statements for the day will be: I can cite textual evidence, I can determine the central idea of text, I can connect the injustices of the Berlin Conference with modern Africa, and I can differentiate slavery of antiquity and chattel slavery. Guiding questions. So this is what we got to be looking for today. What natural resources did Europeans hope to exploit from the African continent? Summarize the methods in which the Europeans divided and conquered the continent, and summarize how the modern nations of Ethiopia and Liberia resisted colonization. Africa before the European invasion. In the mid-1800s, African people were divided into hundreds of ethnic and linguistic groups. The population of the continent was absolutely devastated by the Columbian Exchange. You'll go over that more in depth in US 1. So what we have to realize is, just how big Africa is. So most of Africa were still following their traditional beliefs, while some were converted to Islam, as we talked about in Unit 1, and Christianity. There were 1,000 different languages, and Africa ranged from large empires to independent villages. So, to put into some perspective how big Africa is, here is a map of other countries on top of the continent of Africa. We think of the United States as this just ginormous, monolithic country. But as you can see here, it fits on roughly most of West Africa. And it includes China, India, Eastern Europe, Italy, Switzerland, Germany, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Spain, Portugal, with some room to spare. Great Britain. Great Britain's smaller than Madagascar. Japan's in here. All of these countries can be fit onto the African continent. Now let's focus again on the USA. So when I said thousands of different languages, I want to put that into perspective. Here are the language families that were spoken before colonization. As you can see, look at all of the languages that were spoken in North America before European invasion. Now, think about that just being here. And you have the rest of the continent to go. So, what were those driving forces of imperialism? Dude, we talk about this all the time. The most important thing you're going to learn from me is the 3 Gs. Economic factors. The Industrial Revolution provided Europeans with the need for larger markets. Gold. The 3 Gs. Gold. Political factors. More territory equaled more power. Empires were viewed as a measure of national pride. And if you were the biggest empire, that meant you were the best nation. Also known as glory. God glory. Or gold glory. And then, of course, social factors. Europeans wished to spread their Western culture. They believed that they were the most advanced civilization. We'll get to it. But a lot of that has to do with God. God, glory, and gold. God, glory, and gold. The 3 Gs. It's going to be in every single lesson this chapter, and probably going forward. I talked about belief in European superiority, and this is the beginning. Well, not the beginning, but this is going to be the solidification of modern white supremacy. So these countries believed that they had to have the biggest empire. And as competition intensified, each country was determined to plant its flag literally, on as much of the world as possible. Again, empire equals greatness. So if your empire takes the most amount of land, you are the greatest. You are superior. European superiority. So you can't really go around the world massacring and exploiting its natural resources and people and still think you're the good guy, unless you do some expert level mental gymnastics. And Europeans are going to find that in the form of Charles Darwin. If you forget about sixth grade biology class, well, Charles Darwin is the, I guess, grandfather of modern evolution. He went to the Galapagos Island and studied birds and realized, hey, these are the same birds, but they're at different islands. They have different features, which led to natural selection. That those with the strongest features will survive, and those weaker will die. Europeans, they look at this and they say, all right, we can make this work. And they develop social Darwinism, the theory that individuals, groups, and peoples are subject to the same Darwinian laws of natural selection as plants and animals. So what Charles Darwin's research will morph into is the primary basis of white supremacy and, well, absurd, the gospel of wealth that you'll learn about in US 2. Those who are the fittest will enjoy wealth and were superior to others, and thus had the right to tread upon others. And tread they did. Now, the missionaries also played a key role. Remember, God, glory, and gold. So the God aspect is, well, a lot of Africa, besides the northern parts in the former Persian and Malayan empires, were still polytheistic. And they wanted to send as many missionaries to convert the polytheists to their monotheistic Christian religion. Missionaries believed that European rule was the best way to end the evil practice of slavery, such as the slave trade, which, the irony, was lost on them. Yes, the missionaries believed since abolition took place in most of Europe that they had figured out how to end the slave trade, which they propagated. And since the slave trade of antiquity was still in practice, it was their Christian duty to end it. They also wanted to civilize or westernize people of the foreign land. We call this, well, terraforming when we do it to another planet. Simply put, when we go to a different planet and we do not adapt to that planet's environment and we try to make it look more like Earth, that's terraforming. That's basically what westernizing is doing. They're going to different parts of the world and trying to make it look more European. We have a quote here from Desmond Tutu. When the missionaries came to Africa, they had the Bible and we had the land. They said, let us pray. We closed our eyes, we opened them, and we had the Bible and they had the land. Well said, Breacher. Factors promoting imperialism in Africa. Well, there's one. There's many, but there's one. And that is the Maxim gun, the first automatic machine gun. Genghis Khan and his bows, the British with the Maxim gun, the US with the nuclear bomb. With the strongest technology becomes the strongest foothold. And the steam engine helped too. So now the Europeans are able to take steamboats up rivers instead of, well, with the tide of the river. And with a Maxim gun on their hull, it was pretty easy to mow people down. Africans also lacked a sense of nationalism. We talked about it. Where there are large empires, such as Ethiopia, a lot of the continent, again, so vast, was smaller tribes and smaller clan-based kingdoms. So what the British would do is they would go in, they'd figure out who was mad at who, they'd play them against each other, and when both were weak, take over. Nationalism. But what is nationalism? Well, it's the identification with one's own nation and support for its interests, especially to the exclusion or detriment of the interests of other nations. Simply put, this is, in a modern context, when people say America first, that is nationalism. They are repackaging an old adage. What it is our country matters and everybody else doesn't matter. Remember when I said the nuclear bomb? That's because I was setting up for this. It was figured that the Americans may lose hundreds of thousands of soldiers trying to invade mainland Japan. So instead of that, they killed a couple 100,000 men, women, and children by bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Nationalism is how they justified it. It was better to murder, mostly civilians, of, quote, the others than it was to lose ours. Perfect example of nationalism. And the division of Africa. So, the slave trade was largely abolished at this point in most of the Western nations. So they needed a new way to exploit Africa, and they came up with a doozy. So in 1880, they started the Scramble for Africa. It was the invasion, occupation, division, and colonization of African territories by European powers between 1881 and 1914. See, in 1867, they found diamonds. You know, blood diamonds. And a man named Cecil Rhodes, he liked the bloodiest. And in 1886, they found gold. And like the meme I had earlier, they decided Africa needed some freedom. So they fixed to colonize all of Africa. But the key was they didn't want to fight each other. They just wanted to fight the native Africans. So the competition for Africa was so fierce that the 14th wealthiest nations in Europe met in Berlin, Germany in 1884 and 1885 to lay down the rules of conquest of Africa. This is the point where I have to say, was there any Africans? Of course not. No. They rectangularly divided the continent of Africa and said, hey, you could take that piece, we'll take this piece, you take that piece. As long as you can control the area, you can claim it. And this way, none of us will have to go to war with each other. But not everybody took that sitting down. So the Zulus, headed by Shaka Zulu, reigned from 1816 to 1828, were in South Africa. The king of the Zulu land decided that he is going to unite the various tribes to take on the English. This is going to be a harken back to Unit 2, Day 4, the Mongol Empire. Similar to Genghis Khan, what Shaka Zulu did was he broke apart these clan systems and instituted a meritocracy, putting everybody, again, just like Genghis Khan, into fighting formations based on strength. So when the Anglo-Zulu War happened, he was able to use not just the lay of the land, but the superior military tactic to dispel the British. So much so that in the Battle of Islamwanda, he was able to defeat the British and hand them the largest victory they had or ever would take on African soil. Unfortunately, it was not fully to be, and in 1828, the British reformed in triple number and came through and were able to put down the Zulus, divided the kingdom into 13 quarrelsome groups in order to ensure that no group got big enough to fight them again. Now, I talked about this earlier, that two countries did get to keep their independence from Europe. Now, first is the Empire of Ethiopia, which did have a loose alliance with Italy. And the other being Liberia. By 1914, only Liberia and Ethiopia remained independent. But Liberia kind of was not colonized, since Liberia was already colonized by the American Colonization Society. So, as word and sentiment towards abolition starts to take place in the United States, slave owners did not want to live in a world where there would be free blacks on American soil, understanding inevitably they would have to make good on the promise of the American Declaration or the American Constitution to them. So their solution is, well, if the Africans become free, we'll send them back to Africa. That's exactly what they did. So they took a handful of freed slaves and freedmen and sent them back to Africa, which is modern-day Liberia. But here's the problem. These are not individuals who lived in Africa, then were taken to Americas. No, they were many generations out. So the only system they knew was antebellum South. And they start to set up their new country as a basic mirror to the racist culture of the American South, where they, the Amero-Liberians, would subjugate the native Africans. The capital of Monrovia is named after James Monroe, a tremendous bigot and slave owner. As you can see, the scars of colonialism, they're deep. We see here, again, if we look at our linguistic map, probably should have. This is what the linguistic map actually looks like. Looks nothing like the actual map that was put forth by the Europeans. And to this day, the map looks relatively similar to that. Although there has been some restructuring and refitting of borders and countries to more closely identify with the groups or like groups and specifically religions. And that's it. All right, guys. So you got a new ZLA article that you got to complete. It's called Expansion Was Everything, Europe's Colonization of Africa. Do not forget to annotate. Blue, when you have C, subjective statements. Yellow, when you find the answer to the questions. Green, when you find vocabularies from class. And red, come on, guys, ask me a question. Whatever interests you. Don't ask me, hey, what does this word mean? Google it. But, if you have a good question, please ask. It's worth 2 points. And besides that, everybody, please, if you can, subscribe to this channel. You can even do it on your MPS account so it won't screw up your normal algorithm. But it really means a lot to me because we're trying to get to 100 subscribers so I can get a custom URL. Other than that, be smart, be safe. Have a good one, guys.